So today I wanted to put together a quick video to talk about 5 mistakes that are commonly made when you're utilizing the Back to Eden garden method. So without further ado, let's just get right to it. Tip number 1, don't pile up your wood chips super high against the trunk of your trees. I love wood chips, and I know you're supposed to put them on deep, but you don't want them piled up real deep against the actual trunk of your trees. This is an example of what I'm talking about. These are probably 16, 18 inches deep on this tree. We call this volcano mulching, and this is not a good thing for your trees. Spread them out. Now the reason we don't pile our wood chips up high in the trunk is because trees have 2 different kinds of bark. They have root bark and they have trunk bark. Root bark is meant to be underground. It's meant to live in that environment. Trunk bark is not. It's meant to be above ground, where it gets air and sunlight and circulation so that it can dry out once it gets wet. If you think about Paul's videos, he often says, if you have any questions, go back to nature. And if you look in its natural environment, trees will have this basal flare or root flare that is typically going to be above ground. These areas of the tree you don't want to have buried in any kind of organic matter, because if you think about it, the same beneficial bacteria and beneficial fungus that come in to decompose your wood chips, well, once they get established, they can decompose the bark on your trunk, and that can affect your phloem and ultimately your xylem, and it will weaken your tree, and it's just not a good situation. So you want to keep your chips down and wide, not piled up real high. This is going to be much more beneficial to your tree. Tip number 2, don't try to plant your seeds in chunky soil. Let's go outside and I'll show you what I'm talking about. A lot of times with the Back to Eden method, we're using a lot of wood chips, we're using a lot of organic matter, and what happens is you end up with a very chunky mix in here that can be difficult for seeds to get started in. So you can either be very particular in trying to clean this stuff out, try to get all this out of here real good, or what I do is I actually screen some compost. I get a wheelbarrow with a screen, I screen out some compost real nice. I might add in a little peat moss, and we'll just put just a thin coating of that on top of here, just as a seed starter, just to help those seeds get started and to start germinating, so they don't have all this stuff in the way of those little sprouts trying to come up. can see here, we now have this nice fine bed of soil that we can use to make sure that our seeds can grow properly without any interference. Tip number 3. Don't ever underestimate the need for nitrogen and calcium in your soil. Nitrogen is very important in the decomposition process of wood chips. I talk about this a lot in my last video. It's called Understanding the Back to Eden Method. If you haven't seen it, go back to my channel, find that video. I go into a little bit more detail in that, and I kind of describe the whole methodology of the Back to Eden system in that video. But nitrogen is very important in breaking down wood chips, and quite often it can become a deficiency issue because of that breakdown process. Also, calcium is very important for your soil pH, because by getting a proper soil pH, it can allow your soil to release nutrients that are already there. It also plays an important part in trying to establish the kind of beneficial bacteria that you actually want to grow in your soil. And we're going to talk about that in another video. So where can we get some good sources of organic nitrogen? Well, you want to be looking for things like manure. You can use fish emulsion, or if you're in a jam, believe it or not, human urine is very high in nitrogen. And if you're looking to add calcium to your soil, well, you can go out and you can buy lime, the same limestone that you put down on your lawn. That's typically quite high in calcium, and it's like $5 for a 50-pound bag. Or another option is wood ashes. If you have a wood stove or a fire pit, you can spread your wood ashes out in the garden, and that's going to have calcium, phosphorus, potassium, and small amounts of all kinds of trace minerals. Tip number 4. Don't till your garden.
Don't till your garden.
Don't till your garden.
Don't till your garden. Don't till your garden.
Alex, are we supposed to till our gardens? The reason we don't rototill our garden is basically because it goes against the whole concept of the Back to Eden method of gardening. The whole reason why we do this is to try to build up our organic matter in the soil so that we can improve that soil, and in doing so you're creating an environment for beneficial fungus and beneficial bacteria and earthworms and acetomiaces and all kinds of good life, living soil that you want to have in your soil. And if you rototill that, you're disturbing that whole environment, and you basically have to start over from scratch. A lot of these beneficial fungus and beneficial bacteria, etc., they can do a tremendous amount of good in your soil. They can help to break down organic matter and release nutrients that are otherwise would be locked up in the soil. They also can create relationships with your plant's roots, and they can strengthen your plant's roots. They can release natural antibiotics and growth hormones that can benefit your plants and make them to some degree insect and disease resistant. And in order for that to happen, you really need that environment to be undisturbed so that all these living things can get themselves settled in there and kind of make your garden their home. And last but definitely not least, tip number 5. Be patient. One of the most difficult parts of any form of gardening is having patience. This Back to Eden method, this isn't a magic wand. It's not going to make all your gardening woes go away the minute you put down some wood chips. In fact, you might run into some problems the first year because it's a different way of doing things, and it takes some adjustment. But with time, it definitely will improve your soil, and it definitely will improve your harvest. I'm in my second year of it now. My first year I had some struggles, and I mentioned it before. I talk about some of the struggles I had in my other video, Understanding the Back to Eden Method. And in my second year, I definitely noticed some improvements. I still had some weeds. I still had to water a little bit, but I definitely saw some vast improvements in my second year. Most people say it takes about 3 years to make this all come together, to get that beneficial bacteria, that beneficial fungus, and get all these things going on. You start creating that good, healthy, rich soil that you're looking for. And I can kind of see it coming. I'm starting my third year this spring right now. And, I'm out there in the garden and I'm poking around now that the ground is thawed out. And I can see, my soil is improved. It's dark and rich, and I'm really looking forward to this year. It's kind of like compounding interest, but it's with your soil. Every year it just gets better and better and better. And that makes everything else about your garden better and better and better. So I look at it as an investment. It's an investment in my property. It's an investment in the environment, because organic soil is known to sequester carbon from the atmosphere and actually hold that carbon in the soil, and then it can utilize that carbon to feed your plants with. And most importantly, I really look at it as an investment in my family. It's really nice to know that I'm capable of growing good, healthy, organic, nutrient-rich vegetables and fruits for my wife and my children. So I really look at this as an investment, and it, like any investment, it takes a little patience. Hey, if you guys like this video, if you like the things that I'm talking about, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. Maybe you have some tips and tricks of your own, that you found to be beneficial. I enjoy making these videos. I enjoy sharing what I've learned through the years, and I'd love to hear from you guys too, and see what you guys have learned. So, anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. I hope it helped, and we'll see you soon.